we begin with breaking news this morning because a body has been found in the rubble of an exploded townhouse in Sydney's west. A woman aged in her 30s had been missing since Saturday's explosion in Wayland. The search was called off early this morning.
Multiple investigations are underway into the explosion, with some residents telling the ABC that they had smelt gas there for weeks, if not longer. Jessica Rendell is at the scene for us. Jess, they had been holding out hope that they would find this missing person, but it's been a devastating end to the search.
It really has, Lisa. Rescuers made a grim discovery this morning at around 3:20. They'd found the body of a woman in her 30s who was at the property at the time that the townhouse had exploded. Now, this has been a massive search effort. We've had teams, specialist teams, who were working previously on the earthquakes in Turkey. They were here in Wayland combing through that rubble in hopes of finding the woman alive. But this morning we were given that devastating news that a body was found. Now, she's yet to be formally identified, but she had been unaccounted for when they had searched through this rubble over the last 2 days. Now, Lisa, remarkably, 5 people survived this blast. 2 elderly women were taken to hospital and 3 other people were also treated for minor injuries. They have all fully recovered and have since been released from hospital, but no doubt the mental and emotional scars of going through something like this will take a long time to recover from. And we've spoken to some residents earlier this morning who have told us that this blast was truly massive. They felt it throughout the entire neighbourhood and other neighbourhoods away from here too. So many people in this area have since been moved to temporary accommodation, and the search effort has now been shifted to a recovery effort as authorities try and work to remove the body from the rubble.
And Jess, tell me about these reports that residents had been smelling gas previously and that they'd raised concerns about it.
That's right. So some residents had told the ABC that they reported smelling gas up to a year before this explosion, and residents had raised alarms previously in recent months, and there had been several maintenance checks that were conducted, and on all of those occasions faulty parts were fixed. But of course there are still questions now as to how this explosion happened, and so the state's housing minister has announced an investigation into the explosion. This block of units behind me is a social housing block, and it's owned by the state government, and so no doubt many questions will be left to be answered, Lisa, about this explosion.
OK, Jez, thank you for the update.
In Brisbane, police are investigating after 2 people were found dead at a home in the northern suburb of Albany Creek. Antonia O'Flaherty is live on the scene for us this morning. Antonia, g'day. There's been an update since we last spoke.
Good morning, James. That's right. So one of the things police are considering is that whether this could be a suspected murder-suicide. Now, last night, emergency services were called to the house behind me where they found a man in his 40s and a woman in her 70s, and they both had gunshot wounds. Now, paramedics tried to assist, but they were both critically injured and they were declared dead at the scene. Now, it's early days in the investigation, but police believe they were known to each other, and that, as I said there, one of the things they're considering is whether it was a suspected murder-suicide. Now, we're in the suburb of Albany Creek, in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, and it's come as a shock to residents. We spoke to one earlier this morning who just described that this is a relatively friendly suburb, really quiet suburb, and it's come as a complete shock to them. Here's what they had to say.
Just from watching them, it seemed fine. Like they would just be both together walking their dogs. So.
And how often would you see them?
They used to go actually daily, most days, yeah. So I haven't caught the bus for a little while, but I used to regularly see them. So very tragic and a bit close to home.
So this is all a very distressing scene this morning in this suburb, and police are set to return to the scene to try and piece together what the circumstances were around the death, and their investigation continues today.
All right, Antonia, thank you. And you can get help if this story has disturbed you at all by calling the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service, 1-800-RESPECT. And if you are in distress, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14.
Well, New South Wales Police have found the remains of Kellie Ann Carmichael, who went missing from a hostel in the Blue Mountains 23 years ago. Police found remains in bushland near Katoomba in April during an unrelated operation. Well, they've now been identified as those of the Victorian woman who went missing in 2001. The Unsolved Homicide team is going to carry out an investigation with a report to be prepared for the coroner.
Natasha Ryan, who was at the centre of one of Australia's most notable missing persons cases, has been found dead by police in Rockhampton. Ms Ryan ran away from home in 1998 as a teenager and was presumed to have been murdered by serial killer Leonard John Fraser. Years later, she made international headlines after police found her hiding in a cupboard in her boyfriend's home. Her death is not being treated as suspicious.
And Family and Domestic Violence Services have welcomed a Western Australian proposal to quickly remove guns in domestic violence situations. The state government is proposing to change the law to make it mandatory for police to seize weapons after a complaint is made. It's in direct response to the Perth shootings, where a mother and daughter were shot dead by a man despite several warnings about his firearms.
Brisbane is now the second most expensive capital to buy a home in Australia, with the latest data from CoreLogic showing prices there are up almost 60% since the start of the pandemic. It's overtaken Canberra for the first time since 1997, with Sydney remaining the most expensive city. Nationally, prices are up 0.8% in May, the largest monthly gain since last October.
The White House is confident Israel will accept a proposed Gaza ceasefire if Hamas takes the deal. Key right-wing members of Israel's coalition government have voiced their opposition to the proposal. The plan, unveiled by US President Joe Biden, calls for a 6-week cessation of hostilities, a surge of humanitarian aid and an exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners before a permanent end to the war.
Well, all you get in a yes right now, George, and it's not a small thing, but what you get is the start of phase one. So you get some hostages coming out, initial hostages, you get some calm, you get some more humanitarian assistance, maybe up to 600 trucks, and then the two sides can start talking about phase two.
Back home, and the clean-up continues from a major storm in regional WA that severely damaged homes and businesses. Winds of close to 100 kilometres an hour tore through Bunbury over the weekend, causing the roof to cave in at a local waterfront pub and sending debris flying. It comes less than a month after a tornado destroyed 9 homes in Bunbury.
And Australian-born media tycoon Rupert Murdoch is married for a 5th time at a ceremony at his Californian vineyard. The 93-year-old tied the knot on Saturday with his new wife, Elena Zhukova, a retired biologist who's 26 years younger than him. The pair began dating some months after Mr Murdoch's previous engagement ended.